Within the brutal confines of the UFC octagon, where destinies shift in milliseconds, one wrong move or catastrophic judgment call can obliterate decades of relentless training and sacrifice. Justin Gaethje, famously dubbed the Highlight, has forged his reputation through savage, non-stop warfare that electrifies audiences worldwide. This warrior doesn't merely compete, he marches through hell itself, challenging every opponent to match his ferocious intensity. Yet disturbing whispers from his inner circle suggest a seismic strategic transformation brewing, a partnership that might either launch him into immortal greatness or completely destroy him against the terrifying knockout machine Ilia Topuria. The legendary name circulating through these rumors is Roy Jones Jr., an absolute titan of boxing whose very mention commands reverence throughout combat sports. Initially, this alliance appears to be an unstoppable fusion of raw power and technical mastery. Imagine Gaethje's explosive violence enhanced by Jones's defensive wizardry and ring generalship, seemingly an unbeatable formula. However, everything about this collaboration screams impending catastrophe. This transcends simple skill acquisition or tactical enhancement. It represents a fundamental misreading of mixed martial arts' essential nature. This potentially disastrous partnership, while nobly intended, could prove absolutely ruinous in the merciless environment of 4-ounce gloves where every strike carries instant knockout potential. The same defensive masterpieces that built Roy Jones Jr.'s immortal boxing legacy could render Justin Gaethje completely helpless and exposed. This critique isn't meant to diminish Roy's legendary achievements, but rather acknowledges the harsh tactical reality that cannot be overlooked. Techniques that dominate brilliantly in boxing rings with 10-ounce gloves become death sentences inside cages with 4-ounce weapons where impact physics are entirely different. Justin Gaethje's career faces unprecedented danger, with his professional survival hanging by the thinnest thread. Should he pursue this course and deploy these methods against Topuria, prepare for your fundamental beliefs to be challenged and possibly destroyed, because the truth behind this training choice is far more perilous than anyone realizes or dares acknowledge.
Roy Jones Jr. is going to get Justin Gaethje knocked out. Let me tell you why. Roy Jones Jr. has offered to work with Justin Gaethje ahead of Justin's fight at the White House against Ilia Topuria. Now, I gotta tell you, I'm what you would call a Roy Jones Jr. mark. I love him. I've always loved him. I think he is great. I have always thought that he was great.
Chael Sonnen's declaration cuts through the MMA landscape like an unexpected knockout blow that changes everything instantly. The outspoken analyst, renowned for his unfiltered opinions and fearless commentary, delivers his ultimate prediction with unwavering certainty. Roy Jones Jr., whose name represents boxing excellence across multiple generations, stands accused of potentially guiding one of the UFC's most electrifying warriors straight toward professional suicide and complete destruction. This transcends mere criticism or tactical disagreement, representing an urgent alarm bell, a catastrophic prophecy demanding immediate attention. The concept that a legend of Roy's magnitude could inadvertently orchestrate such devastating harm to another fighter's livelihood is both shocking and deeply troubling. But what drives this concern? Why would partnering with a defensive master like Roy Jones Jr., someone who perfected the science of avoiding damage, be viewed not as strategic brilliance but as an immediate existential threat to Justin Gaethje's career and physical well-being? The surrounding circumstances are absolutely vital for comprehension. Gaethje confronts Ilia Topuria, whose fists function like concrete blocks wrapped in 4-ounce leather, a destroyer whose punching force is both legendary and spine-chilling. This isn't about minor tactical errors or small adjustments that might prove ineffective, but rather a fundamental, irreconcilable collision between two entirely different combat philosophies existing in separate sporting universes. Sonnen's identification goes much deeper than surface-level technique analysis. He's exposing a massive philosophical divide between boxing and MMA that even the greatest pugilist in history, even someone possessing Roy's genius-level understanding, might fail to fully appreciate when those principles face the unforgiving reality of octagon warfare, where multiple weapons and simultaneous threats exist constantly. To genuinely grasp the severity of Sonnen's warning and truly comprehend its significance, we must first understand and respect the distinctly different universes of boxing and MMA as combat disciplines. Boxing treats defense as absolutely sacred and paramount above all else. Footwork mastery, head movement precision, parries, slips, and rolls form the foundational cornerstones upon which champions construct decade-spanning legacies. Roy Jones Jr. was an absolute virtuoso of these disciplines, a nearly untouchable phenomenon who made opponents miss by fractions, then savagely punished their mistakes with lightning-quick counters. It's an elegant ballet of prediction, evasion, and calculated retaliation performed within a ring where punches represent the sole weapon requiring defensive consideration. But the octagon operates as a completely different monster altogether, functioning under fundamentally altered rules and threat assessments. It creates a multi-dimensional danger environment that boxing simply cannot address or prepare fighters for. Takedowns can slam opponents headfirst into canvas, elbows slice flesh like razors, knees separate consciousness from bodies, kicks attack from every conceivable angle, and submissions end contests within seconds. The defensive principles perfected within boxing's squared circle suddenly transform into vulnerabilities and actual liabilities within the cage's confines. Slight head movement designed to slip punches might expose necks for guillotine chokes, while ducking under hooks could lead directly into powerful clinches or double-leg takedowns that put fighters on their backs. The entire defensive mechanics must evolve, adapt, and completely revolutionize to account for these additional danger layers that simply don't exist in boxing's world. Roy Jones Jr. This genius remains absolutely undeniable and unquestionable, but it was forged in different fires under different regulations with different threats and weapons to consider. Importing those precise, perfected methodologies into MMA, especially for a fighter like Gaethje who possesses his own established identity, isn't merely tactical experimentation or interesting training camp enhancement, but rather a massive wager with career-destroying, potentially catastrophic consequences that could eliminate everything he's accomplished. This isn't disrespect toward Roy as either fighter or coach, but stark recognition of modern MMA's brutal realities where specialized boxing defense quickly becomes a deadly handicap that results in devastating knockouts.
That a fighter at the highest level, don't forget Justin Gaethje is an interim world champion fighting for an undisputed world championship. Does Roy Jones Jr. believe a fighter at the highest of levels can learn something new? Something that he could implement in a live situation 6.5 weeks before competition? That would be something very interesting, particularly with somebody.
This inquiry strikes directly at the core of elite athletic development and motor learning science itself. Can a competitor operating at their sport's absolute pinnacle, functioning at competition's highest echelon, merely weeks before their most significant career-defining challenge, fundamentally restructure their deeply embedded patterns and instincts built over countless years? Gaethje isn't some novice absorbing basic principles or developing prospect, still crafting his identity. He's a proven world champion, a demonstrated master operating on instincts and reflexes forged through decades of elite-level training and competition. His approach represents primal, relentless, overwhelming assault constructed on constant pressure and calculated mayhem that destroys opponents both mentally and physically. Introducing new, complex, intricate defensive mechanics at this stage, especially those completely foreign to his core philosophy and everything underlying his career foundation, resembles asking a virtuoso pianist who's graced Carnegie Hall to relearn fundamental scales immediately before a globally broadcast concert defining their entire legacy. Then we must address the stubbornness factor that defines Gaethje as both competitor and individual. Gaethje's obstinacy isn't a personality defect deserving criticism, but often his greatest asset, the wellspring of his power and success. It's unwavering faith in his brutal methodology, absolute refusal to surrender or retreat, even while absorbing punishment. Yet this very characteristic, this incredible strength, could transform any unmastered technique into fragile veneer that shatters under pressure. Under championship fights' blinding spotlights, in battles' intense heat against monsters like Topuria, who bring relentless aggression, fighters inevitably revert to their deepest rooted habits and instincts. What's been constructed over years, even decades of training and competition, will always supersede what's been practiced for mere weeks during training camps. The question isn't whether Roy Jones Jr. can effectively teach these techniques, he absolutely possesses that ability. Rather, can Gaethje truly absorb, integrate, and execute under Fight Night's immense pressure, something so fundamentally new and potentially contradictory to his fighting DNA and everything that's generated his success? Gaethje's stubbornness and unwavering commitment to his approach extends far beyond striking preferences, woven into his athletic identity's very fabric and competitive essence. He is, as Sonnen accurately identifies, an NCAA Division I All-American wrestler, representing incredible achievement at a grappling mastery and technical excellence level most MMA fighters can only fantasize about achieving throughout their careers. Yet within the octagon, under those bright lights, Gaethje actively chooses wrestling avoidance. He deliberately ignores this elite skill set, committing fully to striking exchanges that deliver highlight reel finishes, making him a global superstar and fan favorite. This isn't tactical oversight or forgotten wrestling abilities, but deliberate, conscious decision-making, its manifestation of his all-action philosophy and belief structure. He believes with absolute conviction that his optimal victory path lies in standing and trading punches with opponents, engaging in violent exchanges that fans never forget. Given this deep-seated resistance to utilizing foundational skills he already possesses and mastered at elite levels, how can anyone realistically expect him to integrate entirely new defensive boxing philosophy, something he's never emphasized, in a fraction of time required to build his current approach? This challenge isn't merely technical or physical, but psychological, concerning identity and belief systems running incredibly deep.
Justin Gaethje is an NCAA Division I All-American who has never wrestled inside the octagon. Are you ready for that? So now you're going to grab him and you're going to teach him defensively, because Roy went into detail, and Roy said it had to do with dealing with Ilya's punches, whether you're going to block them, whether you're going to slip them, whether you're going to roll with them. But you must, and I quote the great Roy Jones,
Roy Jones Jr.'s guidance about minimizing shot impact through blocking, slipping, or rolling to reduce damage represents absolutely textbook boxing at its highest level. It focuses on minimizing accumulated punishment over 12 rounds, preserving energy for later rounds, and establishing counter opportunities when openings appear. But for fighters like Gaethje, whose entire identity and success stems from inflicting maximum opponent damage and breaking their resolve, this defensive mindset could feel like betraying his fighting spirit and everything he represents. It suggests retreat, survival concerns over conquest and domination, and against relentless pressure fighters like Topuria, who never cease advancing, displaying even hints of defensiveness or hesitation could be interpreted as weakness, inviting even more ferocious onslaughts and aggressive attacks. This segment reveals the core contradiction at this entire situation's heart. Gaethje, a wrestling prodigy with credentials proving his grappling excellence, actively avoids wrestling inside the cage, choosing violence over control. Now he's contemplating deep dives into defensive boxing, an art form profoundly different from his natural offensive aggression and seek and destroy mentality. Roy Jones Jr.'s sound advice about minimizing shot impact highlights fundamental objective differences between both sports. In boxing, damage mitigation is absolutely crucial to longevity and success. Points accumulate round by round through superior technique over 12 rounds of skillful competition. In MMA, with 4-ounce gloves offering almost no padding and ever-present immediate fight-ending power threats in every exchange, minimizing impact often means still absorbing significant, potentially fight-ending trauma to the brain. Against knockout artists like Topuria, fighters who've proven they can end contests with single shots, partial blocks, or incomplete slips aren't viable survival or success strategies, but rather invitations to unconsciousness before millions of viewers. Gaethje's history repeatedly demonstrates his ability to absorb enormous punishment and continue advancing like an unstoppable machine. But that resilience and incredible toughness isn't a license for increased risk-taking or strategy in itself, but rather testament to his heart and durability, not defensive strategy, keeping him safe against elite competition. Roy's counsel, while brilliant within its own domain and completely sound for boxing, fundamentally misjudges MMA striking's physics and philosophy, placing Gaethje in incredibly precarious positions where his defensive tactics become his downfall.
slip, duck, avoid, roll. I could drink to all of that. In MMA, if you have a strategy to be defensive, you got big problems.
The distinction between boxing defense and MMA defense isn't merely academic theory or coaching debate topics, but rooted in fighting equipment's very foundation and combat physics. 10-ounce boxing gloves with their substantial padding and large surface areas are specifically engineered to absorb and distribute force across wider areas. They permit degrees of impact absorption, allowing fighters to recover between exchanges. Competitors can roll with punches, letting force glance off skulls, mitigating impact, and purchasing precious seconds to regain composure and reset positioning. It's calculated risk-taking, but manageable for trained professionals understanding how to work with that equipment effectively. 4-ounce MMA gloves, however, represent completely different weapons entirely, a different class of destruction. They offer minimal padding, just enough hand protection, effectively making every punch a bare-knuckle strike regarding recipient impact. The impact becomes concentrated, direct, and devastating, focused on small areas with no meaningful impact distribution or absorption. There's no minimizing impact when full-force punches land clean with 4-ounce gloves on chins or temples. It results in knockouts, immediate flash knockdowns, or significant trauma affecting fighters throughout remaining contest duration. This stark difference fundamentally alters defensive tactics and smart defense definitions. What might represent strategic rolling in boxing, clever defensive maneuvering, could result in instantaneous unconsciousness in MMA, with awareness leaving bodies immediately. Error margins shrink dramatically, transforming seemingly sophisticated defense into high-stakes gambling with careers and health. The environment itself, the octagon with 4-ounce gloves, demands different defensive discipline, prioritizing absolute evasion, complete hit avoidance, or aggressive counterpunching over attempts at absorbing mitigated damage. Ignoring this distinction, pretending gloves don't matter, invites unparalleled danger and almost certain disaster.
That can't happen in MMA. That can't happen with 4-ounce gloves. If you go in there understanding, boy, this guy's gonna hit and this guy's gonna hit me hard, and I need to parry it, I need to slip it, or I need to roll with it. If you do any one of those intentionally, you're not going to see the next round. And it wouldn't come down to who's better. In a straight-up boxing contest, it usually does come down to who's better.
The fundamental truth about punchers' chances with 4-ounce gloves changes everything about combat strategy and approach. This represents the argument's absolute crux, the fundamental point that cannot be ignored or dismissed. What constitutes strategic advantage in one sport, marks of defensive genius, becomes grave liability in another sport with different rules and equipment. Roy Jones Jr.'s boxing brilliance was undeniable and unquestionable. His ability to slip, duck, avoid, and roll with punches was legendary, highlight reel material that defined an entire era. He minimized damage while creating angles for counters and establishing devastating counterattacks. That's boxing defense masterclass, advanced degree education in avoiding clean hits. But Sonnen's stark warning about major MMA problems with defensive strategies isn't hyperbole or exaggeration for dramatic effect, but direct consequence of equipment differences and plain physics. 4-ounce gloves aren't about impact minimization or designed for that purpose. They're about delivering raw, unfiltered impact directly to opponents' brains. There's no buffering or significant shock absorption from gloves themselves. Every connection carries knockout potential, while every clean shot can end fights instantly. Adopting purely defensive boxing strategy, relying on subtle head movement and partial blocks effective in boxing, fundamentally misunderstands weapons being wielded and dangers being faced. It's like bringing arrow-designed shields to gunfights. The approach seems admirable, but context renders it fatally flawed strategy. Gaethje's existing style, while risky and leaving him exposed to damage, at least presents immediate, overwhelming offensive threats, making opponents hesitant. Switching to defensive tactics without completely overhauling his 4-ounce glove physics understanding means walking into ambushes and setting himself up for disaster.
Moreover, do I think it's a good idea for Justin to be worried about Ilya's punches? Worried about taking the sting off, worried about absorbing them, but absorbing them less. In boxing, that is one half of the game. But in MMA, that is a recipe.
MMA's boxing defense dangers are multifaceted problems, not single issues, but multiple layered complications. In boxing, head movement creates counter-punch angles while making fighters elusive and difficult targets. That's the entire point and purpose. In MMA, dropping heads or slipping punches opens fighters to knee strikes, unseen elbows, or devastating takedowns, putting them on their backs. Head movement making fighters elusive in boxing rings can make them vulnerable to level changes or clinches in cages where different weapons exist simultaneously. Required spatial awareness is entirely different, tracking different threats constantly. Moreover, puncher's chance concepts, those lucky shots and random punches landing, are amplified to extreme degrees in MMA that simply don't exist in boxing. It's not about fortunate shots or random punches connecting, but rather 4-ounce gloves' inherent nature and how they transfer force directly to brains. Every clean hit, even seemingly glancing ones, can be fight-ending and change everything instantly. Outpointing opponents with defensive maneuvers or rolling with shots to land counters, that boxing rhythm becomes dangerous fantasy in octagons. Against power punchers like Ilia Topuria, who've proven repeatedly they need only single clean shots to end fights and send opponents crashing to canvas, defensive strategies involving anything less than absolute evasion and complete contact avoidance are recipes for disaster and unconsciousness. Topuria doesn't need superior striking and prolonged exchanges or winning every round. He needs to connect once, land one perfect shot, and if Gaethje relies on boxing techniques designed for absorbing mitigated damage, techniques working with 10-ounce gloves, he's actively placing himself in Topuria's fight-ending power's direct path with almost no 4-ounce glove protection. MMA's cold hard truth, the inescapable reality, is this: error margins are razor thin, almost non-existent at elite levels. What works in boxing, those subtle parries deflecting punches, slight rolls with punches reducing impact, head movement minimizing damage, becomes death knell in MMA guaranteed knockout paths. Sonnen's point is devastatingly clear and backed by combat physics. If fighters intentionally attempt these defensive boxing maneuvers against elite MMA strikers with 4-ounce gloves, their nights are over immediately. Fight finished. It's not about superior technical skills but immediate brutal consequences, cause and effect relationships. Physics differ between sports, impacts are different, and recovery times are non-existent when receiving clean connections. Boxing fighters can absorb shots, shake them off, and continue fighting effectively. In MMA, those shots often mean seeing stars, stumbling around octagons, or unconsciousness before hitting canvas. Entire rhythm and defensive philosophy must gear toward avoiding any significant contact, not merely mitigating or reducing damage. Relying on tactics presupposing absorption of even fractional heavy blows, taking some impact while staying conscious, tragically misunderstands the sport and equipment, particularly against predators like Topuria, who smell blood with every defensive mistake and capitalize instantly. Sonnen's personal anecdote about seeking Roy Jones Jr. as advice and appreciating received wisdom isn't Roy betrayal or contradiction, but affirmation of Roy's brilliance within his own domain and expertise. Sonnen received wisdom about running, universal athletic principles applying across sports, not specific combat techniques that don't translate effectively. Roy's advice to Sonnen was adaptable, foundational fitness knowledge, but applying Roy's intricate boxing defense to MMA represents fundamentally different propositions with different stakes entirely. It's not about universal fitness principles, but specialized combat application in specific rule sets. The risk isn't that Roy is wrong in boxing, his greatness is unquestionable, but that his genius gets misapplied in MMA, like using Formula 1 setups on rally cars. This isn't about Gaethje learning something new and expanding skill sets, but unlearning ingrained habits, adapting entire defensive philosophies, and integrating completely new patterns in high-stakes, extremely condensed timelines of weeks. When fighters face forces like Ilia Topuria, there's no time for experimentation or theory testing. There's no room for techniques still in learning phases, not yet automatic responses. Every movement and defensive instinct must be second nature, forged over countless hours of dedicated MMA-specific training against MMA-specific threats. Legendary guidance allure is powerful and romantic. Training with Roy Jones Jr. sounds amazing, but Octagon's unforgiving reality demands brutal practicality over romanticized collaboration and big names. Gaethje's career hangs in balance, not just on performance and heart, but on tactical wisdom, guiding preparation, and implemented strategies that could result in knockouts, period. Sonnen's final warning represents the most chilling indictment of all, the ultimate red flag directly connecting Roy Jones Jr.'s well-intentioned advice to guaranteed knockouts and predictable outcomes. Being worried about Topuria's punches and focusing on minimizing their impact represents boxers' mindset designed for survival and scoring over multiple rounds in different sports. But in explosive, unpredictable worlds of 4-ounce gloves against fighters possessing concussive power like Ilia Topuria, who can end nights with single shots, such mindsets are direct paths to unconsciousness and being knocked out cold. There's no absorbing less impact or middle ground options. There's only absorbing full impact or avoiding it completely by eliminating contact entirely. With 4-ounce gloves concentrating all that force, absorbing clean shots often means fights are over immediately. This isn't victory strategy or competitive advantage, but tactical miscalculation with potentially career-ending implications defining the rest of Gaethje's life. Gaethje's legend is built on willingness to engage in brutal, relentless exchanges fans never forget. If he enters Octagon against Topuria with defensive boxing philosophy, thinking he can minimize shot impact, he'll be fighting against his own nature, against sport physics, and directly into devastating knockout blows he won't see approaching. His career, built on grit and violence and thrilling finishes foundations, faces genuine danger if he follows this path. The shocking decision to embrace this specific defensive training isn't skill set upgrade but gamble that could cost everything he's worked for, everything he's sacrificed, his legacy, his health, and his sport future.